Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you this morning. I just listened in to Tobias Schönberg's presentation, and it was really, really good, really interesting, and it builds a very nice bridge to the topic of my presentation. Tobias talked about autonomous cars and the near future. I will look a bit further ahead and look into what happens when all cars are fully autonomous, fully self-driving. I started working on this topic, how autonomous driving can change sustainable mobility 5-6 years ago. When I started this work, I was very optimistic. I think most people were very optimistic some years back. And they thought, or we thought, that this will really help us reach our goal of sustainable mobility. Through my work, I became more skeptic. And at the end, I was very close to pessimistic. So I named this presentation, How Everything Will Change for the Worse. We have done a study of autonomous driving in Oslo, and I will show you some results. And I will also, through showing those results, show you how I became more and more skeptic and pessimistic about the future. But before I go to the results, I need to bring you on board to a trip into the future. I want all of you to imagine a world or a city where there's no private car ownership. This is a radical thought. We have looked into a future where we don't have private cars anymore. All car travels are done in a shared pool of autonomous cars. We can call them robot taxis. So transport is not something you do yourself. It's a service you pay, mobility as a service. This is the future we have looked into in our study of Oslo. And how can will this future look like? We have looked at morning peak hours, in the rush hours in the morning when everyone's going to work, and then you wake up, you have your morning routines and your coffee as usual. But when you leave for work, instead of going to your own car, you will use a phone or a device to call for a car. Within 2-3 minutes, there's a car standing outside, an autonomous car. It's completely empty, no driver. You get inside and it takes you towards work. If you want to share the cost of this ride, you will allow other people to come on board on the way. So you will do a small detour to pick up other people on the way to work. And they may leave the car and you get to your workplace, and then the car will continue by itself to new customers, new travelers. This is not a very near future. It's some years down the road, but if you're looking at the development, it's absolutely sure that we in the future will have cars that are able to drive around the cities without any driver, by themselves. So this was the task given to us, COVI, and our subcontractor PTV Group by the public transport company Ruter in Oslo. They asked us, what will happen if we change all the cars with these autonomous vehicles in one shared pool of cars? So this is what we did. We used the traffic demand as from the current traffic model. So we looked at all transport within the Oslo region in the morning hours from 6 to 10, 4 hours. That's approximately 650,000 people traveling. And we moved all these people in this system with autonomous cars. We had 4 scenarios, and the scenarios asked the question, what will the current car drivers do? And then they could either do as they do today, use one person, one car, or 1.14 person, which is the average in the Oslo region. Or will they share rides with others? Take a small detour, get more people into the car, share costs. And these future autonomous cars will probably look a bit different than our cars today. So they will be easier or less awkward to get strangers on board the car. So the current car drivers, which is 401,000 people, will either drive as they do today, alone, or allow other people to get on board. And then we ask, what will the public transport users do? Well, they can do as today. They can drive the public transport, or we had a scenario where bus and tram users will change to these cars, these robot taxis driving around. And we can see the impacts, what will happen if that's a scenario in the future. This is a bit far-fetched. We have stretched out the canvas to see extremities here and to get like the broad picture. And the future, more realistic scenario will be something in between here. And I will come back to that. But this is what we have done. This is based on the Lisbon study, but it's much bigger. So we have every single of these 650,000 people we have moved around in Oslo. So we have done a much broader study than has been done earlier. So then we solve all this traffic and we look at the results, the impacts. What has happened in this future? So now I will present you some results from this. And the first result is absolutely astonishing. Let's see here. There we are. 93%. In this model, we can remove 93% of the cars. 9 out of 10 cars can be moved. And we only need about 10 to 7% of the number of cars to do all the traffic work in the Oslo region. This seems extraordinary. Other similar studies have found more or less exactly the same numbers. And why? Well, because a car today drives around on average 12 minutes every morning in this 4 hours period. But our autonomous cars, they drive for 4 hours, picking up passengers all the time. So the enhanced use of these cars will reduce the need for cars. So we can reduce the number of cars by 90% and solve all the traffic we have today. And the impacts on economy, environment, space are huge. So this is really, really good news. And our models show that this is possible. But I told you I'm still pessimistic, so there's more to come. But the number of cars can be reduced by 90%. 14%. What happened in the best scenario? In the best scenario, we have all the public transport users. They are still using public transport, and all the car users, they do this small detour to allow for ride sharing, to allow other people to come on board their vehicle. And then you will have more people in each car, and you will reduce traffic. This is the best scenario in our analysis, and the reduction in traffic is 14%. I don't know what you think, but for me, that was kind of disappointing. I was expecting a much higher reduction in traffic. 14% is not much. It helps, but it's not a revolution. One reason is that the population density in the Oslo region is low. Many people live in houses, and to find someone traveling in the same direction at the same time, the car has to do a quite large detour. And we didn't allow the cars to do huge detour because we don't believe current car drivers will accept very much longer travel time. But to check this result, we allowed them a bit more detour time, and then we came up to 33%, which is much better. But if they don't allow ride sharing, if they use the car exactly as they do today, and all the public transport users today continue to use public transport, the traffic will increase by 26%. Why is that? Well, 26% of the time the cars will drive around empty. And of course, everyone going from neighborhoods to workplaces, the cars will drive empty back to pick more people. So there's a lot of empty driving, 26% of the time. So we need ride sharing to see this positive impacts from autonomous driving. But this is still good. We have reduction number of cars and we can reduce traffic. Why am I still pessimistic? Here are some travel times. Today, a car user spends 12 minutes on average to work, and they travel approximately 12 kilometers on average. 12 kilometers, 12 minutes. That's the car users of today. The public transport users today, they spend on average 32 minutes to get to work. The same distance as the car users on average, but they spend more time. Of course, they spend more time. They have to walk to the bus station. They have to wait a bit, and maybe they have to transfer to a different bus or a different tram, and this will spend more time on all these legs. So they spend more time. In this scenario with ride sharing, the average use of time is 21 minutes. And we have added 1 or 2 minutes of waiting time for the car, and then you do a small detour and it takes a minute to get a new one into the car, and you spend 1 minute to leave the car. So it's a bit more than the 12 minutes the car uses today. So in the future scenario, the car users will spend a bit more time. They will be a bit worse off than they are today. But for the public transport users, they will have an incentives to move to these robot taxis. And if you go into a Uber and Lyft or these travel companies and you remove the driver, the cost of that service will be very low, perhaps as low as a public transport ticket. So the bus ticket will cost approximately the same as a ride with these robot taxis. So the public transport users, they will have a huge incentive to move to these cars instead. They can be picked up on the doorstep and it takes less time. And what happened if the bus riders and tram riders move to these autonomous cars, these robot taxis we have around in this future? The traffic will increase by 100%. And 100% increase in traffic is impossible. This will lead to a complete breakdown of the traffic system. You will have jams everywhere and a hopeless situation. And you can, of course, try to build yourself out of this by building more infrastructure. But we know about the induced demand for car use. So the more infrastructure you build, the more demand you will have and more car use you will have. So there's no way a city can build itself out of these issues. You will have more traffic. And you can imagine if you see from some cities in the US, they have 16 lanes in the highways in the cities, and they still talk about maybe adding one lane to reduce traffic. I mean, you can never increase lanes enough. So here you will have a breakdown of the traffic system, and chaos, it's bad for the economy, bad for the environment, and bad for the cities. So this is the absolutely worst scenario. Will we go in that direction? I'm afraid there's something pointing to that direction. First, let's look at these companies that deliver mobility as a service, taxi services today, the Waymo, Lyft, Didi, Uber, etc., etc. There's many of them. They are investing very heavily in autonomous driving. Why? Because that's a key to their business model. They want to remove the driver to make more money. And in the future, they want to replace private cars. They want to replace your car with their services. It's probably going to be cheaper for us because having an own car you use very rare is very expensive. For them, it's a lot of money to take this huge market. And in their business model, for every extra kilometer they drive, they will make more money. So their incentive is to create as much driving as possible. And if they get you into one of their cars, they're not happy to take you only to the nearest train station. They want to take you all the way. It's money for them in doing the all the way with a car. Am I being mean to them? We already have some research showing this. In New York, we have already seen that even with the current prices, which are much higher than future prices of transport, in New York, the Uber has taken passengers from the public transport riders. So it's not people who leave their car at home so they can take a Uber. It's a lot of people who otherwise would use public transport are now using Uber. This causes increase in traffic. Research from San Francisco shows that it has increased delay in traffic by 40%, because the problem is not only that you get more traffic, but they are used a lot when you already have congestion issues. So they're used when and where you already have traffic jams, and you add on to this Ubers taken from public transport, and you soon get very bad numbers for traffic delay. So this is already here. And imagine when you remove the driver, you make it much cheaper, this can be much worse. And what about the car industry? This is from my favorite car brand, the Swedish Volvo. And this is how they see their future autonomous car be like. Of course, they will probably want you to buy cars just as we do today. That's a good business for them. So they try to make this future car as pleasant as possible. And you don't have to drive yourself. You can read your book, you can work, you can even make it look like a small office. So the time you spend in traffic is not that bad because you're actually working when you are in traffic. And here you can even sleep in the car. And I imagine I almost want to sell my home and buy one of these cars and just drive around all night and sleep. It sounds wonderful. This is not a concept that will reduce traffic. This is built to enhance traffic, because with this nice time spent in cars, the traffic is not longer a big issue and you will drive much more. So car industry will not help us either. And then I will come down to the conclusion of this report. We believe that there is a potential for a sustainable mobility revolution, and that autonomous driving and new technology can play a part in that. but it needs to be in connection with the current public transport system. It can't be used as car I use today. And I believe that the current business models of these transport companies and the car industry will not help us achieve a more sustainable mobility. And all the positive effects we find is in ride sharing. The key is ride sharing. To get more people into each vehicle, that's where we find the positive results. But we as a society, and especially in urban spaces, we already have mechanisms for ride sharing, and it's called public transport. It's called buses and trams and subway and trains. These are much more efficient ride-sharing mechanisms than a car can ever be. One subway train in Oslo takes 1,000 passengers. That's 900 cars off the road. And if they start using cars with 2 and 3 or maybe 4 people in each, it will be 250 cars at least. So the key is to ride sharing, and ride sharing is done best through public transport. And how will we get there as a society? Well, we need regulations. We need politicians who dare to do what it's necessary to reduce car use and to enhance public transport. Tobias Schönberg, he was here before me, talked about the e-scooters. You see here, we have them in Oslo. At the moment, we have too many of them. And it's been a complete free market. We just said, okay, let's see if the market can solve this. And they're absolutely everywhere. And it's impossible to get around. If you're in a wheelchair, it's difficult in a bicycle. And even if you walk, you have to zigzag through them. Imagine these being autonomous cars waiting for passengers. They take up a lot more space than this. So these kind of markets need to be regulated to work efficiently. And I mentioned space, and space is key here, because when we talk about sustainability, many of us think about CO2 emissions. But in the future, if you have clean energy and you have electric cars, that's not really a big issue. But space is still a big issue for urban areas. Space is a scarce commodity, very scarce in city, very high priced. And studies show that 50% of urban space in Oslo or in European cities are dedicated to cars, to roads and parking. And this picture shows quite clearly that car use is a very inefficient use of space. So if you want to create more value out of your areas, you want to move people from cars to bicycles, to public transport, through walking. And this is good for the environment, good for the health, good for the people, for the urban spaces in general, better solution. And you've probably seen this before, but and this is my last slide. We need to remember this pyramid, this hierarchy of transport, where what you really want is walking. If not walking, you want bicycles. You have e-bikes in there, which can really turn things around because you can get so far by bike. Then you want public transport, cars, and air at the bottom. So the top here is the more sustainable, and it gets less sustainable the further down you go. And I want politicians, planners to use this when they design city areas, when they design new roads and streets. And just imagine, it sounds very strange today, but imagine create a street where you first make sure the pedestrians are okay, then the bicycles, then you make space for public transport. And if there's any space left, you can let some private cars in there. This is the complete opposite than how we are creating streets and areas today. I will end by a very short example, which is brand new from London. In London city centre, they have not changed the signal system when you have red and green lights in the traffic. So the new default in London city centre is that the pedestrians always have the green light and the cars always have the red light. That's the default. That's how it, if there's no one around, cars will have red light, pedestrians green light. And whenever the car is arriving, it will take maybe these 30 seconds or 1 minute to change to green, and then they can drive. And then it will turn back to green for pedestrians and red for driving. This is the opposite of all places in the world except London city centre today, where cars have the priority. So these are small things that you can do to look at this and change how things really are done. So that was just one of many examples. So that was what I had for you today. Available for question, if anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much for painting a very realistic and nuanced picture about the far future. Very much appreciated. And a lot of healthy pessimism, I would say, as well. So it has triggered a lot of interest in the audience. So here are quite many questions. I'm afraid we don't have time to ask them all, but I'll start and let's see how far we get. So first, if you say that you could easily remove 90% of cars, what about the peak demand periods or rush hours? Would it create any issues then with only 9 or 10% of car fleet left? How to satisfy the peak demand?
Yeah, so we did this study using traffic demand from 6 to 10 in the morning on a Wednesday. So that's peak hours, that's rush hours, that's when everyone go. So then we can reduce 90%, and we know that's possible. So a question we always get in Norway, because very many Norwegians have cabins in the mountains or on the coast, and you have this the first day of summer holiday or the first day of Easter holiday, everyone's traveling and they want their own car. So that kind of extraordinary travel need to be addressed. But to the everyday traffic, this will work.
Okay. So another question about the capacity of the autonomous cars, of the robot taxis. First is that what is the expected capacity on technological grounds, probably, but I would merge it with a question that asks, there's gonna be the detouring time for the robot taxis to pick up the next, and I mean the second, the third passenger, and this also adds to the distance that will be traveled. And yeah, the question is that how much dead weight loss will it bring along?
Yeah, good questions. The first about the capacity, we used both 4 people, 5 people in the car in this study, and then we expanded to 8 and 10. But it wasn't much difference because it wasn't enough people to pick up. You need to be in a very dense city area with a lot of people, like Paris, for instance, to make use of bigger vehicles in this system. The detour is set to, it can increase maximum 10 minutes and 50% of the ride. So we did expand to twice as much when we get this 33% reduction.
Yeah, great. And one last question. What has happened after you published this work, the scenarios and the calculations? Are there any policy steps already done or being planned?
That's a very good question. From the government side, it's not been done anything. We have a very relaxed or a government that welcomes these changes very much. The biggest change we see in the public transport companies, they doing pilot studies because they say, let's us, the public transport companies, have this fleet of autonomous cars to bring people into the station and to make that part of your bus tickets or your train ticket. So they have started in 3 or 4 places in Norway. They are currently running autonomous buses under strict rules, and today you need to have a person there just in case. He doesn't do anything, but he just stays there. So the public transport companies have started doing a lot to capture this part, this first and last mile problem.
Well, thank you so much. That's at least some encouraging news to finish with. Thank you for your time and effort and joining us today. It really was very helpful, very insightful. Wish you luck and all the best.